Elsewhere in the world, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has arrived in China. It's his first visit there since taking office, and he's the latest Western leader seeking to reset ties with Beijing. The trip comes as German industry warns of growing competition from China. China's Premier Li Qiang said in a meeting with Merz that China was looking forward to more practical cooperation with Germany.
China celebrating the Year of the Horse. The first high-profile visitor to Beijing during this highly auspicious lunar year will be German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, accompanied by a sizable business delegation. It's his first visit to China since taking office. Merz is expected to urge Chinese President Xi Jinping to increase pressure on its ally Russia to end the war in Ukraine. But the primary focus will be seeking closer cooperation with Beijing as a hedge against rising global trade protectionism and tariffs.
Foreign policy and economic policy belong together just as much as defence policy and domestic policy. We can no longer separate them today. That's why I'll be travelling to China to discuss future cooperation between Europe and Germany on the one side and China on the other, with this great middle kingdom, as it calls itself.
Merz is the latest leader to wend his way to China, seeking to stabilise economic ties and navigate geopolitical shifts. Countries that blocked China off during its trade dispute are knocking at Xi's door, all keen to strike business deals. The British, Canadian and South Korean leaders have all visited Beijing this year. Merz needs to be careful not to cause a rift with Washington over China. President Trump recently threatened 100% tariffs on Canada for holding trade talks with Beijing. Germany will be aiming to strengthen ties without triggering a similar retaliation from the US, although the situation remains uncertain after the US Supreme Court struck down many of Trump's tariffs. And there's pressure at home too. Over the past year, German politicians and business groups have increasingly warned about intensifying industrial competition with China and the risk of a new China shock. China has become a sophisticated manufacturer and is advancing rapidly in key technologies, a growing challenge for Germany's export-driven economy. Last year, China sold $1 trillion more overseas than it imported. Germany's economy is highly export-driven, but exports to China fell more than 9% in 2025. Overall car exports to China have dropped by a staggering 2/3 since 2022.
Well, I think what Germany really needs to do is talk less about China and do more. So I don't think he's going to go to China sort of with all guns blazing, criticizing China publicly. I think he will have a very tough message for the Chinese leadership behind closed doors.
Balancing the need to protect vulnerable German industries from cheap Chinese goods while repairing strained ties will be a defining challenge for Chancellor Merz in the Year of the Horse.
And DW Chief Political Editor Michaela Kufner is traveling with the Chancellor. She sent us this update from Beijing.
Friedrich Merz has arrived in China for his first official visit with a big ask for Beijing to stop supporting Russia over Ukraine. Now, everybody knows that that will not happen, but there are nuances in between. At the same time, as China enjoys demonstrating its new, not just political, but economic might around the world, Friedrich Merz's industry in Germany back home faces dropping export numbers to China. Automakers that produce here are really feeling the pinch from Chinese competition. This is something he has to navigate, along with the whole question of where rare earths will come from in the future as China becomes more and more restrictive and is very open that it wants to use this as a political instrument as well. Then there's also pressure from the United States, who want to see their European partners take a tough line on the Chinese government and particularly on their trade deficit. So a tricky mission for the German Chancellor and a big wish list to take home, both for industry, but overall with that overarching concern over Ukraine.
And for more, let's bring in DW's East Asia correspondent Rick Glauert, who's joining us now. Rick, How do you see what's coming out of the Chancellor's first meeting with the Chinese Premier Li Qiang?
Well, Merz said that he was happy for Germany and China to deepen cooperation, but he said he had specific concerns and that the relationship should be fair. I mean, I think that really frames his trip. He, of course, wants a stable, prosperous relationship with China, but he's bringing those real concerns with him over that big trade deficit. The reality is that, Germany is exporting less to China, that German brands in China have less of a market share, and that Chinese brands are increasingly competing with Germany in third countries, around the world. So many of the manufacturers, some of those who will be joining him on this big trip, have real concerns that this is costing jobs in Germany, and they say it's because of unfair practices by China, pointing to things like government subsidies, and they'll be wanting Merz to address those issues.
He's meeting with Xi later. Tell us a little bit more about what he wants from the Chinese leader.
Well, Xi Jinping is obviously, this is the latest in a slew of leaders visiting Xi Jinping, and he'll be happy to host another world leader. He's positioning himself as a stable partner compared to the US, and also, a leader in the new multipolar world order. Germany and Europe are important markets for China, so he'll be looking to increase cooperation with Merz, keep that relationship stable. Particularly after the US sanctions, the China is really looking to maintain access to Germany and to Europe. As the Chinese economy, the domestic demand has been slowing down. They've been increasingly relying on the export market. So he'll want to make sure that Merz and other leaders in Europe don't do any reaction to those, Chinese goods flooding the EU markets.
And the German Chancellor is visiting during China's Lunar New Year festivities. Is there a message behind the timing of the trip?
Well, it's certainly good timing. It sends a good signal. It's been an opportunity for both sides to talk about goodwill, good omens. And also this timing was marked by Beijing. So it obviously shows a bit of a priority in the relationship with Germany at the beginning of the new year. But I don't think that this goodwill will be enough to paper over the big differences, and that Merz does have a big mission here when it comes to the trade deficit and also those big differences on geopolitical issues.
Talk with us about, some of the tricky issues. For example, Chinese support for Russia, Chinese, aggression in the region. Will there be the opportunity to address these matters?
I think Merz will be having to do it very delicately. It will be happening behind closed doors. We won't be seeing any big public address on these issues. Merz has been saying in the lead up to this trip that economic issues and foreign policy are, of course, intertwined. So he may be using that logic to address those issues to China. For example, he can say that China's ongoing support of Russia through its buying the oil and gas and also supplying those dual-use materials that feed the Russia war machine. Merz can suggest that is an economic issue for China, but it's a security issue for Germany and for Europe. Likewise, issues here in Asia, China's aggression around Taiwan and in the South China Sea, that's a direct threat to the global economy, to those all-important tech supply chains. So Merz will, he might have some leeway if he addresses those concerns in that framework.
Let's take it back to the economy. Tell us a little bit more about the economic dependencies of these two nations and how they've evolved over the past years.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have been talking about a China shock that, that Germany is facing up to in the last couple of years and over the last few months even. The relationship between Germany and China has really flipped. For years, Germany was a big exporter to China. China relied on a lot of German machinery, German know-how, buying a lot of German cars. But in recent years, that has completely flipped. And now, China is the one exporting a lot to Germany. That's obviously having a big impact at home in Germany and in relying on those exports and the manufacturing industry. And there's also a lot of dependentness between the two sides. China still relies quite a lot on German imports for materials and other chemicals and manufacturing. But at the same time, Germany relies on China for those all-important rare earth materials to build its cars and other sophisticated technology. So both have hands to play when it comes to negotiations on the trade and economic issues.
Rick Glauer, DW's East Asia correspondent. Thank you.